Think about the things you do from the heart. I was in Desert Storm, and while in Desert Storm, after the battles, several of us got to go give aid to the Kurdish. And when we got to this area, what we realized is that a lot of the parents had been shot or killed, and all that was left was some elders and a lot of children. And it was at that moment that I knew I wanted to be a teacher. It was at that moment I knew that I would devote my heart to education in some form or another. And then I went home and I worked on my degree, and I was one of those guys that wasn't supposed to get a college degree. As a matter of fact, I had a counselor tell me I was going to be a ditch digger. And I remember thinking, I'll show you, you little son of a gun. And I did it, everything, and I worked, and I got my degree, and I became a teacher. And I got to work at a lockdown facility for troubled teens. I did that for 2 years, but I hated seeing those kids get their, what they call their jailhouse religion, and they go back on the streets, and they're stuck in their same lifestyle and end up back in that prison. So then I got to get a job in a classroom, and that's where my life changed. And you think you have everything together, and you think you're a great teacher, or you're great at your job, and then something happens. Well, the something that happened to me was Corey. And teachers, everybody has a student. Mine was Corey. Corey always liked to argue. Corey always liked to talk back. And Corey always was the rebel in my class. And then one day, Corey was not sitting down properly. You want kids to sit down, we're getting ready to take a test. I said, Corey, what's wrong? What are you doing? I said, and I always didn't want to embarrass the kids. I said, step outside, we'll talk. And when I stepped outside, I said, what's going on, Corey? And I know this is weird, but he started to unbutton. I said, whoa, stop. But before I could tell him to stop, he pulled down part of his pants, and his stepdad had beat him so bad, he had this purple whelp on his leg. At that moment, I looked in my heart and I said, I'm here for the right reason. It's for Corey. It's for those kids that can't do it on their own. They don't have the support in their life to move forward. And then in 1996, December 12th, I was in the hospital in the room where my daughter was going to be born. And she came out, and the doctor took her out, put her on her mama's belly, and I looked at this little baby in awe, little squishy head, and I said, my heart is for her. I knew from that moment that I would do anything to be her champion. I knew that I would do anything to be her warrior, that if I fell down, I had to be resilient and show her that I can get back up. I would be her self-sacrifice. I would sacrifice anything to see her be successful, and I would provide her comfort throughout all the days of her life as long as I was there. But would you do that for people that aren't your family? Would you be the warrior for people that you don't know? Would you champion something that you didn't really believe in? I would like to share some stories with you of some unique individuals. And the first one is Woodrow Keeble. A lot of people call him Woody. He was a Medal of Honor winner in the Korean War. And what makes Woody amazing is that he did some amazing warrior things. He had the true heart of a warrior. The term that they used in the Sioux Nation was Wawadetaka. It means do not be scared of anything. Be braver than that which scares you the most. Woody epitomized the true warrior spirit in everything he did. Woody was a big man, 6 foot plus, 230 plus pounds. Now, we see a lot of people big like that now, but in the mid-30s and 1940s, that was a rarity. Not everybody was that big. And he was 100% Sioux Indian. So Woody, when World War II broke out, he had an opportunity to go play baseball with the White Sox. They had drafted him, but instead he enlisted in the military. You see, the Indian Nation, although they had been abused throughout history in America, they also believed in their country. And Woody, having that warrior spirit, decided, I'm going to go serve in the military. So Woody got in the military and he got sent to the Guadalcanal. Now, I don't know if you know anything about some of these battles in the Pacific, but they were fierce. And Woody had some of the fierce battles ever. But Woody also had to deal with prejudice and racism being an Indian. But when they found out how brave Woody was, everybody rallied around Woody. And Woody wasn't just brave because he was a Sioux Indian and he had that warrior spirit. Woody was brave because he wanted to protect those people and his soldiers, and he got promoted fairly quickly. So one day during a battle, Woody would often, the stories go, Woody would often go ahead of the patrols and take out snipers. He would take out enemy patrols on his own. And then sometimes his peers, as they were walking up, he was in the midst of hand-to-hand combat, taking out the enemy on his own. Woody received the Purple Heart and the Bronze Star of Valor, and then World War II was over and he went home, back to the reservation. And Woody became a teacher. Woody was a warrior for those kids he taught. Woody was a warrior for the veterans he liked working with, and he loved working with veterans. Then something happened. The Korean War started. Woody had served his war, but he enlisted in the Army again. And then he got sent to Korea. And this is where Woody's heroic status takes place. One night, there was a hill his company had to take. So 3 platoons were in charge of taking this hill. And what had happened is all the leadership, the NCOs, had been killed or wounded. And there was only Woody and a small lieutenant who were in charge of these 3 platoons. They kept trying to take the hill, and then they'd get repulsed back. They did it again, they get repulsed back, and then finally Woody said, "Stop. I want all these men in the defensive position because we don't need to lose another man." And then Woody, being this brave, big Indian, went to the left, and there was 3 pillboxes, and pillboxes are gunner's nest. Went to the left and took out the first gunner's nest. And then Woody snuck back, checked on these men, and then he went to the right. And then he took out the right gunner's nest. Now the Chinese and the Koreans, realizing what happened, started directing all their fire in that direction. They couldn't necessarily see Woody, but they just started aiming their fire in that direction. And one account witness said there were so many grenades thrown, it looked like a flock of blackbirds falling down. And then Woody had snuck up and he took out the 3rd gunner's nest. Now the men were safe now and they could take this hill, but Woody wouldn't leave the battlefield until the hill was taken and his peers and the people he was in charge of were in safe defensive positions. But Woody experienced some major injuries. As a matter of fact, when he finally released himself of duty, he had 85 fragment holes of grenades, fragments in his body. He had wounds in his chest, his left arm, his legs. And obviously Woody's war was over at this time. He was immediately put in for the Medal of Honor, but the paperwork was lost. And again, he was put in for the Medal of Honor, but the paperwork was lost. Woody went home back to the reservation. And now Woody walked different. He wasn't quite as strong, and he walked with a cane. Woody was in a lot of pain. But Woody, having the heart of a warrior, would put on his uniform with all his medals, and he would go talk to veterans. And he worked with veterans. And he did this for the rest of his life. And when he passed away, he never received the Medal of Honor, but 26 years later, he received it posthumously. Woody epitomized the heart of a warrior. What about the heart of a champion? Now, there are lots of champions out there. There are champions that were champions for years. But sometimes you can be a champion for a fleeting moment and change your life for the better. It was 1990. Mike Tyson was the Goliath of the boxing world. As a matter of fact, boxing publications said he was the pound-per-pound best boxer. And heavyweights never get that designation. It's usually for middleweights and welterweights. But he was given that designation. But he was going to fight Buster Douglas. Now, Buster Douglas was ranked 7th in the world. This was a tune-up match for Mike Tyson to fight Evander Holyfield. But stuff happened with Buster Douglas while training in Tokyo. You see, his mother would go around to the beauty salons and get her hair done, and she'd say, "Oh, my baby's going to win, be the world champion of the world." And she would tell all her friends this, "My baby's going to be champion of the world." And finally, Buster said, "Mom, what are you doing? You realize this is Mike Tyson. He knocks people out just by looking at them." And she said, "No, baby." I can see her looking up at his face. "No, baby, you're going to be champion of the world." So Buster had to have a heart of a champion. But when he was in Tokyo 23 days before the match, his mom died. So Buster's heart changed, and he said, "Oh, I've got to do this." And then a couple days before the fight, he developed the flu. He gets in the ring, ding, ding, and he comes out. He's fighting Mike Tyson. And it's back and forth, back and forth. Buster's in great shape, which wasn't always normal for Buster because his heart wasn't always into it completely. But it was this night. And in the 8th round, Mike Tyson does what Mike Tyson does best, a sweet uppercut to Buster Douglas, sends him to the mat. The referee's counting. On the count of 9, Buster Douglas stands up, and then the bell rings. His corner tells him, you know Mike Tyson's going to come out like a crazed beast, and sure enough, the 9th round, that's what Mike Tyson does. But Buster says, I cannot get knocked down again. And he fights, and then they make it through the 9th round. And then in the 10th round, they start fighting, throwing blows, one another, and then Buster, boom, 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 sends Mike Tyson down to the mat. 1, 2, count of 10, he's now champion of the world. And the media crowds around and they're asking him, how did you do this? How did you beat Goliath? And he said, I did it for my mother. So for one fleeting moment, he was champion. He lost his next match. He went through a lot of troubles after this, but then he got his life together. And now he leads a quiet life in Ohio as a multimillionaire because for one fleeting moment, he was able to gather all that strength and all that resilience and pick himself up off that mat for his mother. So we all have something we fight for. What about the heart of resilience? I don't know if you've ever heard of Chuck Colson, but he was known as Nixon's hatchet man. And Chuck Colson's job was to get Nixon elected president. Chuck Colson wasn't really involved with Watergate, but he did pay the bills. And so he paid the bills, and then once Nixon got elected, he said, I'm going back to my high-paying law practice. Chuck Colson took a major pay cut to work for Nixon. He went from $200,000 a year to $30,000, but he got this cool office right next to Nixon, which made all his cabinet members jealous. And he was tough. He once told somebody, he said, I'd run over my grandmother to get Nixon elected. Which I don't know if I would go that far, but he did say that. He was an ex-Marine. Marines, you know, they get kind of wound up. And then he went back to his quiet life, but his friend got him and talked to him, and he got saved. He all of a sudden accepted the Lord as his Savior, and then all of a sudden Watergate kicked up, and the media didn't believe him. Oh, you just got God because of Watergate. You're in trouble. And then he got sent to jail. As a matter of fact, it was in Alabama. And while there, he realized he could help people. He realized I can help these people that are in prison, and I can help them with their life spiritually. I can help them rehab. I can help them get involved with their families. And then when he was released, he was offered $1 million to go work for some man in Texas. But he said, nope, I have to have a heart of resilience. I have fallen. I will be embarrassed for the rest of my life. I am devoting my life to God. And he picked himself up and he started prison ministries. His prison ministries are all over the world. And he's really changed how a lot of prisons go about handling prisoners and rehabilitation. And it's an amazing story because in Easter, here's this man who suffered this great fall. He was without his family for a while. During Easter, he didn't spend time with his family. He would go into prisons and sleep there and stay with the prisoners for Easter. He did that for the rest of his days of his life. He had the heart of resilience when he fell down. What about the heart of self-sacrifice? Oh, I know my daughter. I would do so much for her. She called me the other day. Her boyfriend broke up with her, which was a good thing for me, but not for her. And she was very upset, and she was crying, and I always try to joke around, but that wasn't helping her during that time. And she told me, you're not helping me. I need you to listen. So I just sat there and listened. And I wanted to go through that pain for her, but I've been there several times. It was her turn. And so she has to go through this. It's part of growing up. But I know I would sacrifice anything to not see her in pain. Have you ever heard of the story of Irena Sendler? Irena Sendler was a Polish social worker in Warsaw. And in 1939, the Nazis came through and they created what they called the Warsaw Ghetto. And their goal was to basically starve out these Jewish Polish people. And they stuffed them all in this small area, 500,000 plus. And they would take them to Treblinka death camp, and they didn't feed them well. But Irina and her peers said, we've got to do something to help. What can we do? And so they devised a plan. We can't really help the adults, but maybe we can help some children. Now, had Irina been caught, she would have been killed right away. But they devised plans, and so Irina, being a social worker, she had this card. She could get into the Warsaw Ghetto, and she could go in and talk to the people, and she could talk to the parents. But could you imagine giving up your child? She would go up to the mothers and she would say, hey, I can't help you, but I might be able to help your child. And the moms would look at her, can you guarantee their safety? And Irina would have to tell them, I cannot guarantee their safety. If I get caught or my friends get caught, they're going to be killed and your child's going to be killed. But those mothers, once they realized what was going to happen, would release their children to Irina. Now, Irina had to come up with some neat ways to get the children out. You can't just walk them out. So for infants, they would sedate the babies and they would stick them underneath toolboxes because they were small and put little tools on top of them. They would also wrap them in cloth as if they were dead because they didn't want disease to spread, so the Nazis would let them get out. For the kids that were a little older, they would talk to them and say, hey, I need you to act like you're really sick and teach them how to act that way. And they said, we can get this one out because of disease. You don't want it to spread to your own soldiers. And some, they would sneak through sewer pipes. And she had a whole team, but one day one of her team members turned her in. Now, there was more to this because Irina would get all the information from the mothers. I need all your children's information. I need your information because after the war, I want to get your kids back to you. Even though Irina knew the truth, they may not get back to her. But she would take that information and put it in a jar, and then she would bury it under an apple tree near the Nazis' barracks. I love that. It's almost like I'm sticking it to you, Nazis. I'm doing it right here in front of your eyes, and you can't do anything about it. But then somebody turned her in. She had all these adoptive families that took these kids in. They could have been caught and killed. And then she was captured, and they sentenced her to death. Now, they didn't only sentence her to death. They brought her in, and they broke her legs. They broke her ankles. And when I'm picturing this, as I'm reading it, have you seen the movie Misery? And they just, I can see the abuse and her slamming her ankles and break them and how much pain she was in. But not once did Irina turn anybody in because she had the heart of self-sacrifice. She was willing to give up anything, even her life, to protect these children. Her and her friends saved over 2,500 children. And after the war, she went and dug up all these jars out of the apple tree, and she would look at them and try to put the families back with their children, but most of the parents had been killed in the death camps. A lot of the families went ahead and adopted the children and took them on as their own. But years later, they were interviewing Irina, and she was a small little lady, and she was very upset, and they said, what's wrong? You did so much. And still having a heart of sacrifice, she said, I did so little. She went to death feeling like she did not do enough, and she did so much and gave so much of her own. My final story is called The Heart of Comfort. And this is also in the Warsaw ghettos. It's Janusz Korczak. I don't know if you've ever heard his story. It's an amazing story. He was a pediatrician. He wrote children's books. He started a children's orphanage in 1911 that was very progressive. As a matter of fact, he would bring the children in and he would teach them, hey, let's create our own government. And he would love them and let them be involved in the process, because usually orphanages during that day, it was just an orphanage, a place that we're giving you food and a bed. But he did more. He wanted to build those children up and prepare them for their future. And then World War II started, and Janusz and his 190 orphans and his 12-plus staff were sent to Warsaw Ghetto. Now, Janusz was very famous because of his books. And so when people realized who he was, they said, hey, no, you don't need to go here. Since you also started the Catholic orphanage, you can go there. But he refused because he always provided comfort to those children, and he wanted to continue to do so. And so they went into the Warsaw Ghetto, and there was a lot of suffering, and anything and him and his staff could do to help these children and keep them comfortable, they would do. But then in 1942, it was time for them to be sent to Treblinka Death Camp. Now Janusz gathered all the children, and he said, I need you to put on your best dressed clothes. He gave them blue knapsacks, and he said, take your favorite toy. And then they went marching through the Warsaw Ghetto, singing songs and going to what he knew was the death camps, but he wanted the children to be comfortable in the process. And as they got close to the checkpoint, an SS soldier noticed him and he said, hey, let me help you. I can help you escape. He said, no, I've got to provide these children comfort. And then as they got to the train, another SS soldier said, hey, you don't know what you're going to. This is bad. Let me help you. And that SS soldier said, my children love your books. He said, no, I'm going to provide them comfort. And they loaded these 190 children, the 12 plus staff, and Janusz on that train, and the train left, never to be seen again. Janusz provided comfort up until his death. I don't know where your heart lies, but I know our hearts control everything we do. I would protect my daughter with everything. I can't imagine not protecting her. When we gave aid to those Kurdish children, I just wanted to provide them food, and it helped me realize I wanted to be a teacher. And then when I fall in my own life, I was able to get back up, and now I'm speaking in front of you. It's because my heart is focused. It's driven. What's your call to action for your heart? What's your call to action to move your life forward? Take this heart with you, and some days you're going to be feeling bad. When you leave here today, you might have some guy run up behind you and doing this and flipping you off. And you may get angry. I would like you to pull that heart out and think about these people that gave so much more. And then just smile and keep driving. Thank you very much.